Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammaṃ Saṅghaṃ Namasami. So it seems it was only yesterday that I returned from one trip, and now I'm about to leave on another. It's the way my life is going right at present. I expecting to meet Luang Por Sumedho in a couple of days in Bangkok, and so remembering one of the years that he came, and after we'd asked for forgiveness, he gave what was quite a famous talk, in which he talked about cessation and parting, and he's saying that he was on a round the world trip, and that everywhere he went there'd be very happy people meeting him at the airport and looking after him, and then when he left each place, then everybody would bow to him and say, "Please come back again." And he used this to express or to point out this tendency we have of always wanting to renew and to carry on, and unwillingness to recognize the end of anything, feeling threatened by that, and always at least the hope that something will spring from this, or that something will carry on, and there will be a renewal of the happiness and the good times in future. And he says, I've been traveling all around the world, and I haven't yet, all the people that I've met, there hasn't anybody come up to me and said goodbye forever. And of course this was what became the title of this talk. I don't know whether we still have it in the tape library or if it's become mouldy and gone forever, but the tape was called Goodbye Forever. So following this talk, and I got hold of Pa Pong and pulled him into a corner and sat him down, and Pa Pong, I want you to say something to Ajahn Sumedho before he leaves. And and cup, like up. Yes, like this. Goodbye forever. Goodbye forever. Good. And so after about 15 or 20 minutes, he's finally got this down, and so we we rushed out to the car, and the car was leaving, and got out there. Okay, Pa Pong. So Pa Pong goes up to Luang Por, goodbye. He forgot the forever, and Luang Por and Luang Por got in the car and left. So afterwards I was thinking it was just as well, probably if he just said goodbye forever, maybe something terrible would have happened and I'd be burdened with guilt for the rest of my life. So, but I every now and again do these kind of around the world trips, and I see for myself the same kind of tendency in myself and others, and finding it very hard to avoid promising that I will return, and it's not forever. And so leaving again, and this particular trip, taking a number of bhikkhus with me, and part of one of the main intentions of this particular trip is to express some gratitude to members of the Sangha who've been so supportive to me over the past few years since I've been the abbot, and of course I couldn't take everyone, and it may well not be the last trip, so it may not be goodbye forever to India when I leave it this time, and I do intend, if I go again, to invite other members of the Sangha who not had the chance to go this time. But India, as I think most of you know, it's always had a very special significance for me since I was a child. And when I was 17, I went there for the first time and was captivated by the place. And towards the end of my time in India, I sort of ordained myself as a kind of a quasi sadhu, and walking around just with actually less clothing than I wear these days, and a little pot, some rice and some lentils and some salt, and I'd make a fire and put the pot on the fire and put the rice and the lentils and the salt and some water, and just boil the water away and eat that one meal. Eat that once a day, because I'd heard that's what serious people do, eat one meal a day. So of course, when I came here, definitely my standard of living actually rose from what it had been previously. And of course, I had many lessons in this brief period as a sort of sadhu, which I have related to the Sangha, I think, on occasions. But perhaps just tell you one short experience that came up in my mind earlier today. And I was walking around looking for quiet places to meditate, and of course I had my ideal of a Himalayan cave, which I just assumed were everywhere. If walking through the Himalayas, you wouldn't think that a Himalayan cave would be that difficult to find, but it did actually prove more elusive than I'd imagined. And one day I stopped by the side of one of these little shops by the side of a road at a kind of a bus stop with a scenic view. And this evening, and the shopkeeper insisted I stay in his little hut with him the night, and then the next day he'd take me to a really great place for meditation, and just the thing that a young sadhu would be overjoyed to find. So I spent that night in this little kind of slightly bigger than a rabbit hutch that was big enough for two of us, and in the morning shut up his shop a bit early, and we started walking off into the hills. And he said this place is really fantastic, and the local municipality have decided out of faith to create something that's really suitable and will attract meditators and sadhus to come and stay. So I wasn't sure whether that was good news or bad news, and there were some hot springs there, and we eventually arrived, I think, in the afternoon, and it was the most horrific place it was beyond what I could have imagined. It was there were some hot springs there, and there was some very coarse, ugly concrete pathways and bathing places, and all these flapping ladies in saris and children, and then at the back of against the cliff wall, very dark and dank and smelly, there was a concrete box, a concrete box with a couple of sort of ventilation slits at the top, and go inside, and it was just concrete, nothing. And this was the cell for would-be hermits, and this poor shopkeeper was so thrilled that he'd be able to take me to this place, and now I could meditate. And I can remember this. Just one of the few times I can remember a deep depression in my travelling days, just sitting in this concrete box with the sound of water, pounding sort of water from a waterfall, and screaming children and ladies outside, and black, and because I just had a piece of cloth, I didn't have any kind of insulation from the concrete either, and miserable, absolutely miserable it was. And I left in the morning, and of course I should have learnt my lesson, but I didn't, as tends to be the case outside of the books of certain Western Dhamma teachers. But I travelled on and stumbled along in my way until I eventually got back to England, and the good fortune, of course, to meet Ajahn Sumedho, and Ajahn Sumedho. Before I left England, I wasn't still at that point completely set on coming to Ubon, and the reason being that it was the year that they were building the boat at Wat Pa Pong, and the monks were the workforce, and the monks were working for weeks on end, from like 10 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, and very, very heavy physical labour, and on a very poor diet, and the Western monks were falling like flies. And one of them had written this very articulate but frightening letter to one of the people, one of Ajahn Sumedho's disciples, and I read it, and I thought, is this really what I want to become a monk to do? And I thought, no, not really. So I was initially unsure about coming to Ubon, but on a Bindabat before I left, Ajahn Sumedho gave me good advice. He said, don't look for the perfect place, because it doesn't exist. And this time it did click really, and it stuck in my mind. But of course, there's always a doubt, isn't there? However good the advice you get from a teacher, that there's always somewhere where the worm of doubt can insinuate itself. And this is why Luang Por himself, said that doubts never end with the words of another person, no matter how wise they are, no matter how enlightened they are. Doubts only end through your own practice and experience. So I wholeheartedly accepted Ajahn Sumedho's words on not looking for the perfect place, but I couldn't help thinking, well, I want it, as good as I can get it. It's not exactly 100%, or maybe sort of, it would seem rational to look for a place which is 95% perfect as opposed to 90% perfect or 80% perfect. So it didn't completely allay the kind of grasping in my mind and the doubts that I had. But again, through good fortune and kindness of others, and who knows what other forces, I found myself at Wat Pa Pong and settled in there and found myself surprisingly tolerant of all the ways in which it didn't really measure up to my expectations or my desires for it. I found at Wat Pa Pong that large sangha of monks, and many of the monks and novices didn't really know why they were there, or they were ordained as an act of filial piety, or they just sort of lost their inspiration and hanging on through inertia. And others, I just couldn't work out why they were there. And yet at the same time, of course, there were monks who were totally inspiring and uplifting, but you couldn't help wishing that they were all that way, and why they couldn't be that way, and how it was that such a great teacher as Ajahn Chah should have so many disciples who didn't really seem to be paying very much attention to what he was teaching. But I realized anyway very soon that that way madness lies, as they say in English, and just to take the monastery as I found it, and to seek out and to see and try to emulate and to be close to the monks that I found inspiring, and to keep a distance from those that I didn't find inspiring. And of course Ajahn Chah was there as a kind of a beacon of light, and I felt that if he'd set this monastery up and it was run according to principles that he espoused, if the way of practice was the one that he felt was most beneficial for his disciples, then I was willing just to go along with that and to trust in his wisdom. And I was just kind of fed up and tired of following my own thinking and my own ideas and my own opinions, and found in him someone in whom I was willing to put that down and trust, even if I didn't always agree or I didn't find it particularly pleasant. So in Ajahn Chah, there's a figure who is now world famous, perhaps after the Dalai Lama. Maybe Ajahn Chah is perhaps the most famous Buddhist monk around these days. And despite the fact that he almost never left Wat Pa Pong towards the end of his teaching career, he went to the West on a couple of occasions, but not for very long. But the power of his practice and the integrity and the purity of his heart created a power which has radiated out right throughout the whole world. And I think that he really showed through his life how inseparable the practice of purifying one's body, speech and mind, and the abandonment of unwholesome dhammas and development of wholesome dhammas, how inseparable that is from creating benefit for others. And there is of course this idea of Theravadins are Hinayanis and just interested in their own welfare and not interested in saving sentient beings and so on and so forth. But I think that Luang Por Chah was such a proof of the fallacy of that argument, and the truth that the more work that you do on your own body and mind, the more resources you have to help others, that you free a great power of wisdom and compassion through this practice. And through living celibate life, the energy, the loving kindness and the compassion is not limited to a spouse or to children, your own family, but it is available, it is spread to all beings. And so it's not that we shut down the emotional side of our life, and it's not that celibacy is makes us poorer in that way, but quite on the contrary. It means that the positive emotions are ones that are able to be expressed most beneficially for all beings, and without any desire for anything, whether material or spiritual or whatever, in as a reward or as payment, or there's no desire for anything at all except to express this compassion as well and as usefully as is possible. So Ajahn Chah was a wonderful example of this, and gave himself unsparingly for others. And even when he was very ill, he took his duties to the Sangha and his duties to guests and people who came to visit him very seriously. And often he might be suffering quite severely from malaria, for instance, and still he would receive guests and nobody would even know that he was ill. He was able to prevent his illness from being obvious to others. He didn't want any sympathy for his condition. He wanted to share his knowledge, his wisdom, and to create as much benefit as he could in his last life before he left this more samsaric realm. For us, the principle, I think, is clear, that there is no conflict at all between devoting oneself to solitude or turning within and putting a lot of effort into formal meditation practice. There's no conflict between that and between serving all sentient beings. This is the way that we do our work as Theravadan monastics and bhikkhus, and because the more work that we do internally, the clearer we understand the nature of body and mind, we understand the nature of the way things arise, the way things pass away, the wiser we are with regard to our own 5 khandhas, then the wiser we are to the nature of human beings in general, because there's no difference really. And we begin to, the more we understand ourselves, the more we understand others, and the more we understand the way that suffering arises, the way that defilement arises, and the more compassion we feel for ourselves, and the more compassion we feel for others. And indeed, these qualities are so closely related that we can use them as a measure of each other. That's to say, if we want a measure of how wise we are, then we can look at our compassion. We want to know how authentic our compassion is, then we look at our wisdom. Because these two things are so closely bound together, or they're like two wings of a bird, great eagle. Now if we're developing contemplation of three characteristics, but this does not result in sort of compassion for sentient beings, then I would suggest that there is something unbalanced there. Because when we understand the way in which we and all beings unnecessarily create pain and suffering for ourselves, then how could compassion not arise? We see when we focus more on the pain, then compassion arises most prominently. If we choose to focus on the unnecessariness of it, then this feeling of sober sadness and nibbida arises. So this is another shade of it, of compassion. You can slightly shift the focus from compassion to dispassion, or to a sense of disenchantment with the world. And if there's no, even though the true nibbida, which the Buddha refers to, is a very high level of practice, but as with any of these very advanced or profound Dhammas, then the preliminary, the work, the foundation can be laid and can be increased in strength and fortitude day by day. And the more that we see the fundamental triviality, inconsequentiality, and pointlessness of samsaric attachments, then the more we're willing to make sacrifices to transcend, and the more we're willing to put up with and to patiently endure the pain that arises when we put down things that we've come to cherish through wrong understanding, or the things, or to put perhaps more simply, addictions. If you're addicted to something, you can't expect the cessation of an addiction to come about without any discomfort. If there wasn't any discomfort, it wouldn't really be an addiction. But when you have a strong conviction that there is a post-addictive state or a non-addictive state, and that state of non-addiction, of freedom from addiction, is attainable, then you are willing to stay with it and not to give too much importance or credence to the passing emotional weather surrounding the practice. So when your mind doesn't grasp onto and focus on and make such a big deal of how you're feeling about it, whether you're inspired or not inspired, or you're happy or unhappy or frustrated. But when you're focused on the work and you're convinced of the validity of it and the efficacy of it, that it actually works, that it's something that you can do, then you can bear with it. This is where patient endurance comes from. And so when we perform acts of service for the Sangha, then if those acts of service are performed mindfully and wisely, then they also are working to untie the knots of self-cherishing, self-regard, self-importance. It helps our meditation practice. So if meditation practice is conducted and with right view, it undermines the sense of self and dissolves the obstacles and the barriers between ourselves and those around us through acts of kindness, through acts of sacrifice of what you like, what you don't like, and aiming for that which is correct and true and noble in your external conduct. This affects the quality of your meditation. You're not taking me, I, what I want, what I need, as being imperatives in your daily life. Then you're working away at that, the whole foundation of ignorance, which the meditation practice is aimed at completely destroying. So there can be a harmony between the internal effort and the external effort. And when really understand the principle behind it and what we're trying to do here, how craving, how attachment manifests in our daily life and in our relations to others, how craving, how attachment manifests within meditation practice in terms of the hindrances in particular. So we're studying, we're learning, we're observing, and we're becoming more intelligent in avoiding and putting down and saying goodbye forever to those things in our daily life which bind us down and which tie us into more knots. And we're doing the same thing. Meditation practice is, if meditation practice is this kind of struggling and striving to concentrate your mind, even though you'd rather be thinking about something else and you'd rather be doing something else, this kind of sense of struggle in meditation, then it's going to be very hard going. But when you choose to be with your meditation object, freely choose, because you see the value of it to you. You see its role in the whole process of purification, and you see, you may even consider the wonderful abilities and resources that you will have to create happiness and welfare in the world once you have done this work and doing the Sankhānussati practice, remembering, recollecting the great teachers that we may have had the opportunity to pay respects to ourselves, or perhaps we've merely read about or heard about. Think, how would it be wonderful if we could free ourselves from these defilements, from these hindrances, and to realize that the state that those monks realized through their efforts. How wonderful it would be, not just for ourselves, but for others. How wonderful it would be for the sasana, because this sasana which we love and which we've devoted ourselves to, this sasana, Buddha sasana, thrives and flourishes and survives from generation to generation through the efforts of committed Buddhists, ordained and lay Buddhists, to preserve the written teaching in its purity, and to preserve this unbroken stream of enlightenment which stretches back from the Buddha right forward to the present day. And as long as there are Arya Pugalas in the world, then Buddhism is safe, and there is the kernel for development. But if Arya Pugalas disappear from the world, even if the Tripitaka is safe, then the sasana will be terribly damaged. And so I find this kind of reflection is very helpful, and to see that this is not kind of just a personal project, a personal kind of development project, and but this is something that has implications and has a ripple effect, if you like, on the whole universe in which we live, and the extent to which you purify your heart, the extent to which you develop wisdom and understanding, is the extent to which you create something of value for the world in which you live. And this is our ideal as monastics, and something which which the whole society, the culture, supports. That's why we're given the requisites that we need. Well, we're given the robes that we wear, we're given the food that we eat, we're given the kutis that we live in, we're given medicines when we're sick, because we live in a mature culture which values the Dhamma Vinaya, and values those people who are willing to renounce the more mundane pleasures of sensual existence for this work, which is ultimately of priceless value to the world. So I think it's fitting to be feel very proud to be a part of this, and to be one who has the opportunity to contribute to the preservation or even to the flowering or the flourishing of this wonderful teaching. And encourage all of you sometimes to step back from the day-to-day nitty-gritty of working with defilements and trying to let go of attachments and developing meditation practice, and see this within this larger context of Buddhasasana and the world of sentient beings, and the rising and passing away of suffering on a global or a universal level, and to position yourself within that. And it's perhaps not a way of to be looking constantly that way, but every now and again just to step back and to see what this is that you're doing, what this is that you're a part of, because it's a matter of finding skillful means really to maintain this practice through time, because this is not something which is accomplished very easily or in a very short period of time for most of us. This takes years and years to really develop, and we have to find that energy and commitment and integrity to be able to say, yes, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to put my whole life on the line. I'm willing to do this for 10 years and 20 years and 30 years and 40 years and however long it takes. That's the kind of constancy and the kind of mind state that you really need to be successful, both for your sake and for the sake of others. So I'd like to share these thoughts with you this evening.